Welcome back to Candy's Classic Game Shrine, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about console variations. While I don't have as expansive as a collection as many others, I do have some cool variations of different consoles within my collection, and I'd like to show those off today. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the first console variation I want to show you guys is nothing too special. I'm pretty sure every kid in the 90s had the original Game Boy, and a few years later they released the Play It Loud series, which came in a bunch of different color variations, but because I'm a 80s, 90s kid, I had to get the translucent one. I love being able to see the insides, and I had a telephone that was translucent, I had a boombox that was translucent, I had Game Boy that was translucent. I had all the things that were translucent that could be translucent back in the 90s, so go figure that I would have one of these. Next up, to keep it in the Game Boy family, I'm going to show you a Japanese exclusive variant of the Game Boy Pocket. So I absolutely love the original Game Boy. It was one of the first consoles that I played as a kid, first handheld that I played as a kid, and Japanese people got a variant of the Game Boy Pocket that looks just like the original Game Boy, and I had to have it for myself. So this next one is in a lot of ways similar to the last Game Boy that you guys saw. It is also a Japanese exclusive, and it's kind of almost a Game Boy Pocket. You'll see what I mean. So what I'm talking about is the Game Boy Light. This is a unique console that was only released in Japan, and it was the first Game Boy, or honestly, first Nintendo handheld that had a backlit screen. And it is really nice to play. It has a nice soft, like bluish green glow to the screen that doesn't hurt your eyes, and it's really nice. It's got a nice form factor, and if you compare it to the Game Boy Pocket, it's maybe a few millimeters larger than the Game Boy Pocket. So I promise this is the last set of Game Boy variants. These are Game Boy Advances though. So I have the AGS 001 here, and this is the first edition of the Game Boy Advance. This just has a front lit screen. It's kind of crappy, but then they later released the AGS 101, which has a very nice backlit screen, and a lot of times these were, I don't want to say butchered, but they were sacrificed, let's say, for their screens before IPS screen mods were much more common. So they might be a little bit more pricey to find now. I haven't looked, so don't hold me to it. So our next console is another handheld, but it's not Nintendo, and it's kind of modern. It's a Sony PS Vita. Nothing really special about this other than the color. As you can see, it's this really pretty blue. I had to have it because blue is one of my favorite colors. And this was a GameStop exclusive. And my first Vita got stolen, and when I got my replacement, I saw this one, and I had to have it just because of the color. So, yeah, this is really nice. Mine is hacked and well loved. So we are done with the handheld consoles, so let's move on to my home console variants. What we have here is the ice blue Nintendo 64 and accompanying controller. This particular console and controller are my original ones from when I was a child and made my dad buy these and drove him crazy. It still works, still use it often, and I mean, how do you not love this color? This goes back to the whole translucent thing in the 90s. Like, I had to have it. I know there were many other N64 fantastic colors, but the blue again was my favorite because, like I said about the Vita, blue is my favorite color. So this next one is a one-of-a-kind console, and only I own it. Many of you that are familiar with my channel already know where this is going, so let me not delay. My prized and precious Virtual Girl. This is a custom console that I did back in 2000, 2008 or something like that. It's been a few years, so I can't really remember anymore, but it's a custom console that I did as a joke that has taken off, and here she is. She has a matching controller as well. So if you happen to see me at a convention, chances are I'll have this with me and you can play it. She sits proudly with my other two, yes, two Virtual Boys. So we all know the Sega Genesis, and we all know that that thing has had more add-ons than you could shake a stick at. But did you also know that it's got tons of different versions? You have the Model 1 Genesis, the Model 2, you have the CDX, you have also the JVC-Xi. This is a variant of the Sega Genesis and the Sega CD. So as you can see here, you have your CD drive, and then here you have your cartridge slot. This was given to me by a good friend, and I freaking love this thing. It's so quirky and unique, and it's underappreciated and not talked about enough. We're nearing the end, folks. We're in the home stretch, so let's bring on the next system. It is a unique one, and if you have watched my previous videos last year, then you may have seen this one in a couple shots and things, but it's been a white whale of mine for years, ever since I learned of its existence, and now I finally have it. I got it on my way home from the PRGE Expo last year, and here it is. This is the Sega Pico Pikachu edition, or as I like to fondly call it, the Sega Pico-Chew. Yes, it's a terrible pun, but I love it. This is a children's entertainment toy. Think of the Leapfrog children's toys of today, but a little bit more basic and Pokemon themed. So basically what you would do is you would open this up, just take that out for now. You would put in a cartridge that kind of looks like a book, and you would plug this into your TV, and you would take this stylus and navigate this bottom screen using the stylus or the buttons, depending on what the book cartridge thing you have installed asks you to do. But it is mine. I love it so, and I'll put it together better later, but here it is. How can you not love this? It's got a neat little handle. It's got a kickstand, way more efficient than the one on the Nintendo Switch, might I add. But yeah, this is just insane. I honestly wish I knew how Sega got the rights from the Pokemon Company, and I guess in part Nintendo, to actually make this. There's also a console from Sega called the Sega Bina that has more Pokemon games for it, so it's really weird. The Bina is basically the Pico 2, but it's still weird that Pokemon games exist on a Sega console, but that's neither here nor there. So let's get to the next console. My next console variant is of a console that is beyond popular, at least in the United States. I know Europe and some other regions were a different story, but the NES is a system I hold dear to my heart. That is the first video game console that I have ever played as a child. I think Donkey Kong Jr. was, I think, the very first game I ever played. But I never had a top loader growing up until now. This is one of the refresh consoles that Nintendo puts out, kind of like midway through a console's life cycle, at least how they used to. This one read cartridges significantly better than the original model, and the pin connector lasted significantly longer. And this one is modded for AV, but it didn't come like that originally. But this is one of a couple NES models that I have that we will now see. Last but not least is this Sharp Nintendo television. This is a licensed product from Nintendo back in the late 80s. We aren't 100% sure how many were made. We guesstimate in the tens of thousands, and we estimate that only several thousand still exist. We used to have a pretty good database on how many were, still alive and what condition they were in, but I think that's since been lost to time when Nintendo Age exchanged ownership and all of that nonsense. But back to the TV. This is a CRT TV, but when you open up this door here, there is an NES cartridge, and when you turn it on, oh wait, actually I don't need the remote for this. You have a working Nintendo. So let me plug in a controller. And we will try it out. We're going to play something that I loved playing as a kid. So yeah, this is it. This is the original controller that came with it. It's a little bit different than your typical Nintendo controller. Here's one of my other original childhood controllers. Yes, it's taped up. I don't want to talk about it. But there it is. Well, everyone, I hope you all enjoyed and maybe saw some variations that you've never seen before and maybe perhaps want for yourself now. If you liked the video, don't forget to like or comment or subscribe and all that stuff. My social links are in the description below. And until next time, guys, take care.